will be indicted.
If he was going to be brought up on charges, they would have done it the week that Michael Brown was killed.
It's clear these protesters are organized.
That's what we're going to do, the maypole.
Just take a look at this wedding registry set up on Amazon for supporters to buy them supplies like surgical masks, cameras, and swim goggles. But determining who is in charge is a challenge.
People are always looking for, so who's the leader? Everyone is. We're all very active and we all take our roles very seriously.
Max Peterson came all the way from Seattle to participate in the demonstrations. He's staying at a house with other protesters.
Why does a young white guy from Seattle feel motivated to come to St. Louis and be here for a month for this?
I didn't understand before August 9th how oppressed black people were in this country. I am white, so it's not my struggle, but I'm here to help them out.
When a lone Darren Wilson supporter showed up at this pro-Michael Brown rally,
All lives matter. Your life matters.
a shouting match ensued.
Black lives matter.
Yet for some people in Ferguson, it's less about Wilson and more about the protesters' response. This white resident is afraid to show her face on camera because she fears retaliation for speaking her mind about the protests. She doesn't appreciate out-of-towners disrupting life for the people who live here.
If there's peaceful demonstrations, that's fine. But to have the violence that we've had and from people that are outside of Ferguson in the name of Ferguson, no, we don't like that.
I know you're saying buying groceries, but how long are you preparing for?
Several days. I think that we need to plan and have those plans in place, but hopefully we won't need it. I hope that we can return to a normal life someday. And after the rioting is gone.
Stephanie Elam joins us now from Ferguson. Stephanie, there was a moment in that piece where you had the supporter of Officer Wilson clashing with the protesters there, and you got a sense of just the rawness of that emotion. You know, with all these preparations that we're seeing on both sides, do you have a sense there that both sides are preparing enough to keep those emotions under wraps when that decision comes through?
That's the million-dollar question at this point, Jim. You hear people preparing, you hear them talking about what needs to be done, and one thing that keeps coming up when you talk to the protesters is we don't want something small escalating into something big because police overreact. And then when you talk to the people who live here in Ferguson, they say they want to know more about what the police have in store, what they're planning to do if things do escalate. They want more information, but obviously there's a disconnect right now because no one wants to show their cards ahead of this grand jury decision coming to light, Jim.
Well, Stephanie, thanks very much for being there on the ground for us. More now on the law enforcement side and their notion of preparing for the worst. Some call it sensible, others see it as overkill. St. Louis Alderman Antonio French, for one, who tweeted, and I'm quoting here, "The National Guard is called in when policing has failed. Military presence in my city will mark a historic failure on the part of government." And moments later, this. This started on August 9th with government overreaction to black youth, and it continues. This is not a war. There is no military solution. Alderman French joins us tonight along with the Reverend Robert White, pastor of the local Peace of Mind Church of Happiness. Antonio, I'd like to start with you. I want to ask you to explain why you believe that calling in the National Guard means that policing has failed. Do you see this as a military response like we saw just after the shooting?
Yeah, so what I worry is that we may be repeating some of the mistakes that we saw back in August. We want police to deal with individuals who commit individual crimes and not punish entire crowds of people like we saw back in August. I worry that the military presence of National Guardsmen will actually escalate the situation as we saw occur several times back in the early summer.
Well, Pastor White, I wonder